It was 1946, just after sunrise, in Marcus Garvey Park, Harlem. At 6:23 a.m., an old woman walked her dog along the same path she followed every morning. From a distance, she noticed something hanging from a large oak tree near the park's north entrance. At first, she thought it was trash, maybe clothes caught in the branches. Then she stepped closer, and she screamed. When the police arrived, the park was silent. Too silent. Detective Robert Walsh reached the tree first. One look made him stop in his tracks. His stomach tightened, his hands went cold. This wasn't just a body, it was a message. A young black man, no older than 20, hung from a thick rope tied high above the ground. His feet barely touched the air. His neck was twisted at a terrible angle. His hands were burned raw from fighting the rope. He had not gone quietly. Pinned to his chest was a piece of paper. 3 words written in ugly block letters. Know your place. Walsh didn't need anyone to explain what this was. This was a lynching. In Harlem. In New York City. In 1946. Walsh checked the victim's pockets. His wallet was still there. Inside was a student identification card. Name, Thomas Johnson. School, Columbia University. Walsh's face drained of color. Not that Johnson. Please God, not that family. His partner, Sullivan, walked up behind him. Who is he? Walsh swallowed hard. Thomas Johnson. Sullivan paused. Any relation? Walsh nodded slowly. His uncle is Ellsworth Johnson. They both knew the name, Bumpy Johnson. Silence hung between them. Finally, Sullivan spoke carefully. What do we put in the report? Walsh stared at the ground. He thought about the law, about justice, about how things should work. Then he thought about how things really worked. 5 white men had murdered a black teenager. Even if they were caught, no jury would convict them. The system would fail, just like it always did. Walsh exhaled. Suicide. Sullivan? Suicide. Yes, Walsh said quietly. We call it suicide. We file it, we notify the family, and then we stay out of what comes next. Sullivan understood. They cut Thomas Johnson down, and Harlem held its breath. Thomas Johnson was 19 years old, a first-year law student, brilliant, quiet, kind. He wanted to become a civil rights lawyer. He believed in courtrooms, laws, and justice. Every Sunday morning, he walked through Marcus Garvey Park on his way to church. Same path, same time. Someone had been watching. The men who did this were not strangers. They were members of a secret KKK cell operating in northern cities. Men with normal jobs by day and white hoods by night. 15 of them met quietly in a warehouse near East 98th Street. They wanted to send a message. Thomas was chosen because he represented everything they hated. Young, educated, black, rising. On the morning of September 15th, they waited in the park. When Thomas entered, carrying his Bible, they stepped out of the shadows. 5 against 1. He ran. He fought, but he never stood a chance. 4 minutes later, he was dead, and they walked away believing they were untouchable. They were wrong. At 7:12 a.m., the phone rang in Bumpy Johnson's office. The voice on the other end was shaking. "Boss, it's Thomas, Ruth's boy. They found him in the park." Bumpy said nothing. "How?" he finally asked. "They're saying suicide, but there was a note." Bumpy hung up. For 10 minutes, he sat perfectly still. Memories flooded back, teaching Thomas chess, watching him graduate, helping him move into college. Then Bumpy stood up. "I'm going to see my sister." Ruth Johnson sat on her couch, surrounded by neighbors. Her eyes were empty. When Bumpy entered, she looked up. "They took my baby." Bumpy sat beside her and held her hand. "They said suicide," she whispered. "My son would never—" "It wasn't," Bumpy said softly. "It was murder." She broke down. When her tears finally slowed, Bumpy spoke again. "I'm going to handle this." Ruth looked at him. "Will it bring Thomas back?" "No." "Then why?" "Because no other mother in Harlem will feel this again." She nodded. "Make them understand." "I will." That morning, Bumpy stood beneath the oak tree. He noticed what the police missed: cigarette butts, work boot prints, a torn factory button, a matchbook from a white tavern outside Harlem. Clues. Then he found Curtis, a homeless man who slept nearby. Curtis had seen everything. 5 white men, one name repeated: Danny. And where they went after. Bumpy already knew what came next. Justice was coming. By the time the sun reached the rooftops of Harlem, Bumpy Johnson already knew this would not be handled like business. This was family, and family meant consequences. Back in his office, Bumpy closed the door and made one phone call, then another, and another. Within 3 hours, he knew everything: who they were, where they worked, where they slept, who they loved, what they feared. 5 men, ordinary on the outside, mechanics, factory workers, clerks, monsters in the dark. They thought Harlem was weak. They thought New York protected them. They thought no one would answer. They were wrong. Bumpy called 4 men he trusted with his life: Illinois Gordon, Willie Lee, Quick Jackson, Marcus Cole. They had watched Thomas grow up. They had driven him to school. They had seen his future. Bumpy laid 5 photographs on the table. "These men killed my nephew," he said calmly. No shouting, no anger. That scared them more than rage ever could. "We don't rush," Bumpy continued. "We don't miss. We don't leave witnesses, and we make sure the message lasts." 7 days, 5 men. Every one of them would understand what they had done. Day 1, the leader. Danny Morrison was the loudest, the proudest, the one who pulled the rope. He worked at an auto shop in the Bronx, lived alone, thought no one knew him. On the second night, Danny stayed late in his garage fixing his car. He never heard the door open. By the time he felt hands on his arms, it was too late. They tied him with the same kind of rope he had used in the park. Danny's eyes widened when he saw it. He knew. They didn't rush. They didn't speak much. "You remember what you did," Willie Lee said. They lifted him once, then lowered him, again and again, each time letting him feel the panic, the fear, the air disappearing. On the 4th lift, they didn't stop. The next morning, Danny Morrison was found hanging in his own garage. Pinned to his chest was a note: 1. The police called it an accident. Everyone else understood. Day 2, the fire. Rick Sullivan heard about Danny by morning. By nightfall, fear owned him. He locked his doors, checked his windows, slept in his clothes. But fear doesn't save you when the trap is already set. That evening, Rick went into his garage to fix a lawnmower. He smelled gasoline too late. The door was locked from the outside. A match slid through the mail slot. The fire exploded. Rick survived, barely, burned over most of his body, face destroyed, life ruined. Pinned to the mailbox outside. 2. Day 3, the hunt. Lou Bennett loved the woods, so Bumpy sent him there. For 3 days, Lou was followed, never touched, never seen, only heard. Footsteps, voices, his name whispered in the trees. By the 3rd night, Lou was broken, crying, begging, talking to ghosts. They found him wandering in circles, dehydrated, insane. In his pocket, 3. Day 4, loss. Frank Dorsey tried to hide his family, move them to a hotel, but his house stayed behind. So did everything he owned. At 2 a.m., flames wrapped the building. Nothing survived. Not photographs, not memories, not proof he ever lived there. On the mailbox, 4. Day 5. The choice. Only one man was left. Charlie Ross. And Charlie understood. He knew he was next. Instead of running, he was given a choice. Deliver a message, or die with the rest. Charlie was taken to the warehouse on East 98th Street. That night, 15 men gathered. Charlie told them everything. What happened to Danny, Rick, Lou, Frank. Then he told them the rule. Disband, leave New York tonight, or the warehouse burns. They laughed. They voted. 10 stayed. 5 left. Bumpy watched from across the street. Count, he said. 10, Illinois replied. Bumpy nodded. The end of the cell. Near midnight, fire bottles flew. Windows shattered. Flames swallowed the building. The exits were locked. 7 men died. 3 escaped, burned and screaming. The police ruled it an accident. The case closed in 48 hours. After that night, the KKK never operated in Harlem again. Not once. By the time the fires were out, Harlem already knew. Not the details, not the names, but the message. Whatever had happened after Thomas Johnson died, it was finished. Completely. On September 24, 1946, more than 3,000 people gathered at Abyssinian Baptist Church. Men in work clothes, women in black dresses, children holding their parents' hands. The church could not hold them all. People stood outside in silence. Thomas Johnson's casket was closed. His mother, Ruth Johnson, asked for it that way. She wanted people to remember her son as he was, alive, smart, hopeful, a boy who carried books, not a body hanging from a tree. Bumpy Johnson stood beside his sister the entire service. He did not cry, he did not speak, but everyone could feel the weight around him. This was not the Bumpy people feared. This was the uncle who failed to protect a child. When the service ended and the casket was lowered into the ground, Bumpy stepped forward. He placed something on top of it. A photograph of Thomas, smiling, wearing his Columbia sweatshirt, holding a law book. Bumpy leaned down and whispered so softly that only Ruth heard him. They all paid, he said. Every man who touched him, every man who stood behind them. Ruth closed her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she nodded. "Good," she said quietly. "Now let him rest." The silence after. What followed was not celebration. It was silence. The kind of silence that comes after a storm. Police officers noticed something strange. The warehouse on East 98th Street stayed empty. No meetings, no gatherings, no whispers. The white men who used to drink together stopped showing up. Some moved away. Some changed jobs. Some pretended nothing had ever happened. The police reports were thin. Accidental fire. No suspects. Case closed. Detective Walsh filed the paperwork and never spoke of it again. He understood something most men never do. Sometimes the law knows when it has failed, and when it does, it looks away. Years later. In 1963, a reporter asked Bumpy Johnson about September 1946, about the rumors, about the men, about Thomas. Bumpy was older then, slower, but his eyes were still sharp. "My nephew believed in the law," he said. "He believed courts protected people." The reporter asked, "And you?" Bumpy paused. "I believed in the law too," he said, "until it called a lynching a suicide." "So you took justice into your own hands?" Bumpy looked directly at him. "I didn't take anything. Justice was owed. It just came from somewhere else." The reporter never printed the interview, but the story lived on. What Harlem remembered. After 1946, something changed. Not just fear, understanding. No crosses burned in Harlem again. No ropes, no warnings. Because terror only works when it goes unanswered. And in Harlem, it was answered. Not with speeches, not with promises, but with certainty. Thomas Johnson wanted to be a lawyer. He wanted to fight injustice in courtrooms. But the courtrooms failed him. So his uncle became what the system refused to be: justice. And that is why, for decades, one rule stayed unbroken. Harlem protects its own. Touch its children, and the cost is everything.